Yo, what up, people? Welcome to the Outside the Box podcast. I am Jacques Slade. I am one of the three of the host of this show. Happy to have you guys listening. As always, we appreciate you. Thank you guys for supporting the last episode. Really love the respect and the feedback that we're getting from you guys. You guys make a big difference when you guys talk to us and you talk back to us. That way, it's just not a one-way conversation. We want this conversation to go both ways, and you guys make that happen, and we definitely appreciate that. As I always tell you guys, I'm not the smartest guy in the bunch here. I'm definitely hanging with two people that are way smarter than me, way more experienced, and have a lot more knowledge than I do when it comes to the sneaker world, and that's why you guys listen to the show. Not for me, it's really for them, and that's Nick Ingvall and Tiffany Beers. Nick, go ahead and tell them about yourself and where they can find you.
Hey, Nick Ingvall here, works in the sneaker business for a little over a decade, and you can find me at Nick Ingvall, NickEngvall on all platforms. You can also find me on sneakerhistory.com or at sneakerhistory on all platforms, but really I'm just here to learn from Tiffany. So Tiffany, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Beers. I've been in the sneaker world for over a decade, and you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Tiffany Beers, TiffanyBeers. And clearly I'm in a hotel today, so a bit different studio.
You know, the cool thing about this show is how humble you two play it. I really appreciate you guys not trying to embarrass me and play it really humble. Like, oh yeah, we're just people that have been in the sneaker industry and we do cool stuff. Really, I'll be honest with you guys, these people are way more important than they put on, but I appreciate you guys not, making me feel like the small man here, and I do appreciate that. All right, with that being said, let's get right into the show. And first thing is something that I am all over. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm a big fan of anything that has to do with space. I want to go into space. I want to be on a rocket. I want to go to Mars. I want to travel at light speed. I want to investigate black holes. So anything that has to do with NASA, I'm all for it, especially when it comes to sneakers. And it looks like Mercer Amsterdam is actually doing a collaboration with NASA, and there's only going to be 96 pairs of this sneaker. So I am super duper pumped about these. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get my hands on a pair. It's not like they're the dopest sneakers in the world, but it's just the fact that they're literally working with NASA is really all that it takes for me to get behind it. I don't know about you two, but I'm like a super space nerd, from sci-fi to actually thinking that one day I'll actually be able to go into space. That's where I am with this. So I don't know about you two, but I'm all for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome. There's been a definite generation gap in the energy around NASA and space and all that stuff. But I think in the last 2 to 3 years, it's been kind of crazy to see all the excitement around it. Obviously, what was it, just maybe a week or two ago, right? They announced that one of the first people to travel around the moon as a what would you call it? As a guest on one of the SpaceX flights is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years or whatever it is. So, I find the NASA stuff even more fascinating because it's not just a space travel thing. It's not just an advancing for advancement for humanity like it was way back when. It's become a fashion. It's become such a fashion statement, right? This, and for a company like Mercer to partner with NASA to create a real shoe, it reminds me of the the Apple shoes in the 80s, or some of the other brands. I think Burger King had their own shoes in the 80s, and it's just a really cool thing to see, for me, to see somebody take, especially Mercer being kind of making their own shoes and bringing in NASA to do something really special and really limited. And like you said, I think it's awesome that it's super limited, but definitely kind of a bummer because you probably never get your hands on a pair.
I gotta say, my favorite movie of all time right now is the Martian. Like, we're gonna science the shit out of this, right? Like, I love Matt Damon. Like, if I knew, no, I can't. I wouldn't go up. I don't want to go to space. It terrifies me. Like, the whole thing terrifies me. So no boats, no space for me. But I do have a friend that works at NASA, Mary. I went to college with her and played volleyball, and she's actually a flight director there, which I don't know what that means since they're not like sending people into space, but I think it's badass. And I love all the actual space stuff they're doing. I think it's super rad, and I think people will learn a ton about it. Like, I like sci-fi books too, about space. Like, there's one about living on the moon. And like a colony. I can't remember the name of the book, but it was fantastic too. So I like to fantasize about space, but I'm not going. Nope, no way.
Not going?
If they need me, I ain't going. Unless you can knock me out for the ride. Like, knock me out until we get there or something.
Oh man, I'm so excited by the thought of going to space. Just blows me away. And like, I know the danger, and I know how incredibly small my chances of living are by going into space, but there's just something about being outside of the earth and being able just like to see and to explore and to go places where no one has ever gone before, and I'll probably be killed by some alien bacteria or something like that, but I don't even care. I'm just like so about just going out into space and being a part of that and experiencing that from a personal point of view. But I was thinking about this, and I feel like NASA has had such an impact on the sneaker world as well. Like, a lot of stuff is inspired by space. I remember a couple of years ago when the space stuff was the sneaker stuff was way out of control, especially with Nike basketball. For All-Star, they had it was when it was in Houston. I think it was in Houston, or was it in Florida? It was in Houston. I think when they did like the Galaxy, all the Galaxy colorways and all that stuff, and like that's all inspired by space and by sneakers. And so like for me, that was just like the perfect pairing of sneakers and NASA, or in that situation, space, but not NASA exactly for me. So I'm all for it. I would love to get a pair. It says they'll be sold on their website in the pop-up store in Amsterdam, and I'm obviously not going to Amsterdam to get myself a pair, but I really wish there was a way I could get my hands on a pair, although I'm definitely not going to play resale. So if you're a reseller out there and you're listening to this show, the answer is no. So don't even email me. Don't even shoot off that email, because it is not going to happen. I promise you that right now. I mean, I just love it. I'm just really excited about it. And like thinking about that makes me think of like the Tom Sachs Mars Yard, like that kind of stuff. Like all just kind of comes together for me when it comes to sneakers, but maybe that's just me. And then you like even like the Reebok Alien shoes from Alien that Sigourney Weaver wore, like all this stuff. I don't know. Okay, all right, I'm being a nerd now, so I'll leave that alone. And switching over to obviously basketball, since we were talking about basketball earlier, there is a story out about J.R. Smith and his tattoos. So for those that don't know, J.R. Smith got a Supreme tattoo on his leg, right? It's on the back of his leg. Is it his thigh or his calf, like his calf muscle?
His calf.
Yeah, like his calf muscle. And there is a story now that the NBA is actually going to force him to cover it up during the games. Now, we talked about this a little bit before the show started. Nick was talking about it. And I kind of have some mixed feelings about it. And Nick, you brought up some really good points about Shaq and the Jumpman logo and stuff like that. So let's just kind of go back over that so we have that.
Yeah, so the one thing that comes to mind, specifically is Marcin Gortat, had a Jumpman logo on his, I think on his calf, probably maybe like 4 or 5 years ago or something. And he had a deal with Reebok at the time, and then Reebok asked him to cover the logo. And then, eventually, like, he left Reebok, and that kind of became like a thing for him to wear Jordans, obviously having the Jumpman logo right above his shoes. Right. But I seem to remember, like, Shaq having either that logo that is kind of, his dunk man, so to speak, and that being, his Shaq brand. But I know for sure he had the Superman logo, which was a part of his Shaq brand back in the early 90s. But I feel like there's probably even more players with tattoos. Like, when we were looking through this a little bit, you see that J.R. Smith has a Jumpman logo tattooed on the middle of his chest. And I think it's really weird to me that the league would say, no, that logo's not cool, but these other logos have been okay in the past, right? Like, Gortat's played with a Jumpman logo. And I get that, that brand is connected to the NBA loosely, but there's never been an official partnership between Jordan Brand and the NBA, right? Like, that's always been, like, even until recently. Like, this is back when Nike wasn't the brand making the jerseys even. So this is just a really weird thing and weird timing to me, because why now, right? Is it just because it's J.R. Smith and, he's the one that's going to get all this attention from it, and you can't handle that as the league? Or, I just feel like the league itself made huge steps in not, stepping into people's, lives with the dress codes and the tattoo stuff. They went so far in the 90s, the late 90s, with, Allen Iverson and making all these guys wear suits when clearly they're not people that want to wear suits. And this seems like a misstep by the league to me, compared to the way, they've been going, especially with the, like the changes in the footwear dress code, right? Like, it seems like things are getting more laxed, where this just doesn't seem to make sense to me. So,
I guess from my perspective, I imagine the league would do something like this because the tattoo is so obvious. I know, like, other people have tattoos, but this one is just like blatantly, like, big, if that makes any sense. If it was like something smaller where you didn't really notice it, like if a player was playing and you couldn't tell what it was, like the Jumpman logo, like on Gortat, it's there, but it's not like, oh, that's a jump. If he's running up and down the court, you're not going to be like, oh, that's a Jumpman logo. You kind of got to get a closer view of it to really see it. But this is just like supreme, is like huge on the back of his calf. It goes all the way down his leg. Like, it's pretty big, and I would think that that's the reason why the NBA would say something about it and have him cover it up. I think it goes over like an artistic, I think, kind of thing, or like inspiration sort of thing. It's to the point where I feel like it's blatant advertising, if that makes any sense.
But, I mean, even if it is, why do they care? I mean, this person got a tattoo, so they went through all the pain of that, and that is a big tattoo. Even if they got paid for it, who cares? Like, why does the NBA care? This person is going to live with this for the rest of their lives on their skin. Like, who cares? Do what you want to do. I mean, I draw a line at, foul stuff and things like that, but I don't understand why they care. I mean, especially if he has it on his skin. Now, fake tattoos, I know one of the articles mentioned, like a fake tattoo of some branding. Yeah, that I agree that probably shouldn't be done. But, like, if you want a big tattoo like that, that's real, and you endured that, like, have at it. Go for it. I hope you really like that brand.
Yeah, I think that's the... Yeah, I think that's the funny part. It's just like, it just seems like they're very selective about it, and I totally agree. This looks like a crazy advertisement, right? But the reason in that ESPN article basically says that it's the rule basically says no displaying any commercial logos or corporate insignia on their bodies or in their hair. And looking back, like, you obviously have other places. Like, I'm pretty sure Anthony Mason for the Knicks used to have a Yankees logo in his hair at times. And, like, clearly you're just picking and choosing what corporate logos or what, corporate commercial insignia or whatever is okay and what's not, right? Because that, to me, is just as obvious, if not more obvious. You're not going to see J.R. Smith's legs near as much as you're going to see a player's, a logo cut in a player's head right above their face, or in their hair right above their face, rather. But I don't know. I mean, I do agree with you. This seems really over the top compared to a lot of the other stuff that we've seen with this. So
yeah, it's interesting. I don't want to say that the NBA is picking and choosing, but I feel like if it doesn't feel like it's a I don't know, if it doesn't feel like real, if it feels like it's I guess if it feels like it's an advertisement, like Iman Shumpert, when he did it, when he put the Adidas inside of his hair, you didn't feel like it was genuine, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to say that J.R. Smith isn't genuine with getting a Supreme tattoo, but it just, I don't know. It just feels like,
you know what I think.
And I guess
this is going to be really interesting down the road, though, because you know how we talked about players kind of having their own stuff aligned now. You know, with the power of social media, you know, you look at like Big Baller Brand or something. I wouldn't be surprised if those guys have Big Baller Brand tattoos, right? And that's the future of a lot of these athletes, you know, kind of creating their own way, creating their own brand, or, you know, like we talked about specifically, creating their own personal logo, and, you know, before they get into the league, and taking that to a Nike or Adidas or Reebok or whomever, and saying, this is my logo, you guys work with this to incorporate it in the products that we're going to make together. I don't know, it's just really interesting.
But I mean, it's some level of brand loyalty to want to tattoo your body with their logo. So, I mean, so what? Like, that, great on that brand for building that level of loyalty. I mean, I don't have tattoos, and it's because I could never commit to something strong enough that I want it written on my body. And, you know, I'm not a fan of needles. So there, no space, no boats, no needles.
No space, no boats, and no needles. That's good. Not mad at that at all. That's actually really good. Not mad at that at all. But yeah, I do wonder. What sparked all of that? I don't know. But just Supreme, I just feel like that's such a hype beast sort of thing that's happening. So
I mean, he was you know, a part of their advertising for the NBA collaboration last year. You know, he was their, you know, kind of official photo, or, you know, model or whatever, and he's been seen in that stuff for years. So it's not really a surprise to me. Like, I think it seems natural for him, but you know, for someone to have that big of a logo of anything is still a little crazy.
Yeah, I mean, is it about the money though? Like, so okay, so let's play this out. So say Supreme gave him $1 million to get that giant tattoo on his leg. You know, like, one, are you willing to do that? Like, are they worried that this is going to be a bad influence for, you know, young kids who look up to these basketball players? You know, like, I just have so many questions about that I think the NBA shouldn't be worried about. On some level, you know, they've got kind of bigger issues to kind of tackle and you know, be concerned about. And, you know, we talked about this with Colin Kaepernick. Like, athletes have a voice in social change these days. So how is this different? Like, this is the way he wants to express himself, even if he was paid for it. This is what he's choosing to do. So why does the NBA get to have a say on that?
I'll say, but shouldn't the NBA have a say on what's being advertised during the games?
But you're talking about body, like, it's physically part of his body now. I think that's a different level to me. I mean, if you want to use your body for advertisement, there's a whole level of different questions I think I have for you. And I don't think they should care. You know, they pay a lot of money to get sponsorships. If they want tattoo sponsorships, if they want an NBA logo on all players, they could probably do that. Yeah. You know, they could probably force them all to get an NBA logo or a tattoo. So, I mean, I don't know.
All right. I'll leave this one up in the air. Audience, if you're listening, let us know. Should the NBA be concerned about J.R. Smith's Supreme tattoo? Is it okay that he wears that in a game, or should he cover it up? Let us know what you guys think. Make sure you tweet us at Outside Pods, or hit Tiffany up, or hit Nick up, or hit me up directly, and let us know what you think. I don't think we're actually going to get a solution to this one. I don't think we're all going to agree on this one. I definitely think it's something that should be discussed.
For you know, in Tiffany's example, they definitely got their money's worth, regardless of whether he's got to cover it up during games or not, right? Because it's all over everywhere, and it's going to be talked about every time you see it. So,
Yeah, I think that's called earned media is what they call that.
Or tell us how much Supreme would have to sponsor you to get a giant tattoo like that. How much money would it take for to really get that tattoo?
There you go. That's a good question for the audience. What would Supreme have to pay you in order for you to get a Supreme tattoo? Let's say on the back of your calf, like J.R. Smith
Let's spin this. What would Jacques have to pay you to get Kustoo on the back of your calf?
There's not enough money in the world. I'm probably sure. But keep it with the NBA. Kanye's basketball shoes potentially could get banned by the NBA, and really it's not what you think. It's not because the shoes were made by Kanye. It's because some of the materials that are on the shoe, apparently, according to our good buddy Nick DePaula over at ESPN, the NBA does not allow reflective materials to be on basketball shoes that you play in on the court because they can be distracting. And based on the images that we have seen so far of Kanye's basketball shoe, it looks like they have 3M on them, which is obviously something that's reflective or reflects light in a certain kind of way. And so those would not be allowed. So I know a lot of the story is Kanye's shoes are being banned, and it's really not about Kanye at all, but more about the materials that Kanye is using on the shoe. Now, Tiffany, I'm going to ask you this. I don't know if you know this, but do you know about any of these rules from working at Nike?
No, I do not.
No? Oh, okay. Yeah, I know that there are certain rules and that the shoes have to be delivered early before like the season starts and like before the first half of the season in order for them to be approved. But I didn't know that there was a reflective material clause in there that would prevent the players from doing that. But I imagine it makes sense because they don't want something that's distracting, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it comes down to like if there's you're not allowed to use flash lenses though at the games, right? So I was just thinking though, if a photographer had a pretty big flash, there's a chance that it could reflect off that, hit a player in the eye, and they lose track of the ball, right? But since you're not allowed to use flash, I don't know. This was a little surprising to me. I mean, I understand it, and I think what they're trying to do is protect kind of the boundary of what's allowed and what's not, just to make sure that nothing impacts the players and their gameplay. But I think this is a little bit outrageous, just a little bit.
Yeah, this is kind of a common thing, I think, with a lot of shoes. You know, we probably don't hear about a lot of them, but even in the ESPN article, Nick talks about how the Carmelo Anthony M10 from Jordan, the initial versions came with the chrome heel, and that had to be changed to have like a matte finish, you know, for him to wear in the games. I think you know, also interesting thing about this whole buzz is that it's buzz, you know, like this is kind of what kicked off like the Jordan brand, you know, Jordans in you know, their whole story of the band, you know, band ones or whatever, like the Nike Air Ship being banned really is what happened. And then the Jordan 1, you know, black and reds or whatever became, you know, like the story of being banned. It was more marketing, you know, value than even just him wearing the shoes on court, really. And I think this has happened, you know, multiple times. Like I remember, you know, APL, Athletic Propulsion Labs, right? They did like the bounce cushioning or whatever, like their, you know, supposed springs in the shoes, and that they got banned by the NBA, which basically kicked them off and like started, you know, helped them grow that brand. You know, it's still a fairly successful brand. It's not as sneakerhead focused as it once was, but it's definitely, you know, it's definitely successful. You can get it in a lot of places where, you know, without that like, you know, buzz of the shoe being banned by the NBA, I don't know that they would have, you know, kind of reached the levels that they reached, or at least not have reached them in such a short amount of time. But I'm, you know, and this is just one shoe that we've seen too, so they will definitely make YEEZY basketball shoes for, you know, players in the league to wear. That no question about that. So
it makes me wonder if J.R. Smith's tattoo is reflective. Maybe that's the issue.
They use the metallic ink.
Yeah.
Looking at some of the articles about this, it says the NBA's official footwear policy states that shoes containing flashing lights or similar types of adornments, examples metallic or reflective, are not considered appropriate basketball footwear. So it's really, honestly, this has nothing to do with Kanye West. Even though Kanye West is the main headline on this story, it really honestly has nothing to do with him. Adidas could have made these shoes on their own, or Nike could have made these shoes, or Reebok, or anybody, Anta, for all we know, could have made these shoes. If they have this sort of 3M or reflective sort of a property to them, they would be going through the same issues. So it's a bit of a non-story story. Like, it has nothing to do with Kanye, but people are just throwing Kanye's name out there just because they know that it gets headlines, and that people are going to click on it, and maybe that's why we use this story. But it's the pot calling the kettle black here, people. But I totally get it. And it makes sense for the NBA. Like, my thought is, like, if somebody's shooting a free throw and you have like reflective stuff on your shoes and you kind of like reflect the light into someone's eye as they're shooting a free throw at the end of the game that could win the game, like, that's a big deal. That makes sense.
You could probably start a fire too, little magnifying glass, the right light.
Yeah. Right light. I'm saying I've seen enough Saturday morning cartoons to know that this stuff happens. So I'm not ruling it out. I'm not ruling it out at all. But switching to a bit of a different story. Now, I wasn't familiar with this individual, but both Tiffany and Nick are. There's a gentleman named Sandy Bodeker. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. And he happened to pass away. And although that name may not seem familiar to a lot of you guys, and myself in particular, from what I understand, he does have a long history in the sneaker world and helped put together some of, I would say, the biggest moments in the sneaker world over the last, 10 to 15 years? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I would say even going back further. Going further back.
Yeah.
Oh, further back.
So,
wow.
So a lot of what I would say his impact was, in what like the typical sneakerhead would know would be the early Nike SB stuff. It wasn't necessarily even Nike SB at that time, but he's the guy on the Nike side of things that made stuff like the Flom, the For the Love or Money Futura Dunk happen. That shoe was like a crazy, it's probably one of the most valuable shoes out there. He was behind shoes like the eBay Dunks that, were cut up, the charity, all that, the whole story. If you're familiar with that, just Google it, you'll find it. And more so like just the thought of bringing in other people to, kind of work with Nike as this massive, corporation, right? Like that's a very unique thing. And he was doing that in the late 90s, early 2000s when, nowadays collaborations happen everywhere across every type of, everything. And back then it was just, it wasn't a thing. And, you could even say that he potentially even started that whole trend of brands seeking more connected companies, individuals or companies, to the culture to bring that to, this big corporate level. But it's definitely, I know he'd been battling cancer for a few years, and but it's just sad to lose somebody that had really such a big impact on the whole big picture of what sneakers is.
Absolutely. I mean, he was at Nike for about 36 years. I think he started in like 82. I mean, so he was definitely a legend, like really, on the edge of everything and really challenging the brand. He even ran football for a while, soccer business, so definitely a sad day. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family and everybody at Nike, who is missing him and thinking about them at this point. And most recently he worked on the Breaking 2 project, which was Nike's attempt to break the 2-hour marathon. And that amazing project, I definitely feel for the folks at Nike over this kind of sad time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he had a huge impact, and I'm shocked that I wasn't familiar with him as much as I love sneakers, and it really goes to show how big the world of sneakers really is, and that there's lots of different parts of the world. But I was looking over the Instagram account for Nike SB, and in their description they say some joked SB stood for Sandy Boddicker. The truth is SB wouldn't be here without Sandy. So the Nike SB account is full on saying look, yo, we know we've done a lot over the years, but we wouldn't be where we are without Sandy, and that's a big thing to say. So if you are a fan of Nike SB, just know that someone has just passed that had a big part of that world and that helped really build the Nike SB world. So obviously prayers for his family, and our condolences to his family, and God's grace on them to give them peace through this difficult time. I'm sure it's a terrible time, and for his friends and family at Nike, the same goes to you guys. I definitely want to send our condolences and our prayers for you guys. So it's a big deal. Yeah. All right. With that being said, moving on to something that I think is actually pretty cool. I love seeing bigger brands kind of step into the gap and do things for the less privileged. And it looks like Imagine Dragons, Zappos, and Superga, I guess that is, teamed up on shoes that support kids with cancer. So they're allowing. Are the kids designing these shoes? I'm looking here to get a better idea of what's going on, but I know it's the Superga is a brand, and they have these shoes that have these designs from looks like Imagine Dragons album cover artist Tim Cantor is supporting the foundation's mission to help families both financially and emotionally that have found themselves dealing with pediatric cancer, and they're releasing these shoes for those people, which I think is really awesome. A lot of times sneakers seems like it's a greedy thing, or shoes it's always a personal thing, and it always seems like you're just getting something for yourself. But seeing something like this happen that's supporting others, I think is really, really dope.
Yeah, I think I agree 100%. I think it's awesome to see things that aren't traditionally what us sneakerheads think of as the cool things, or the even the that type of even Imagine Dragons musically doesn't fit into what is traditional sneakers in the that sense, right? And Superga is obviously not one of the brands that a lot of sneakerheads are probably even familiar with, but I think that's kind of where I really love these types of things, because they bring new energy, new people, new thoughts, and just new opportunities to do something good for other people in the world. Just and sneakers just happens to be at the kind of centerpiece of that. So I'm pretty stoked for these. I'm actually probably going to get a pair.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I love just looking outside of traditional means and using something like sneakers, which obviously is a touch point for the culture and a touch point for someone like me, and making it into something a little bit bigger. So that's awesome. So if you want to check those out, it's part of the Tyler Robinson Foundation. They're the one doing it. The shoes are going to sell for $80, and they are available. I think they're available. Oh, actually, they're actually available right now over on Zappos.com for $80. And I'll be totally honest, I know most of you probably never shop for sneakers on Zappos. They don't generally carry the hype stuff, but they do carry a ton of tennis shoes. So if that's something that you're into, or if there's someone in your family that's into something like that, it's definitely something I would say I would look into. Now, with that being said, here's a story that I'm not sure how I feel about it. It's about counterfeit sneakers. It's both fascinating and I would say frustrating at the same time. The folks over at High Snobiety did a story on a man named David, who is being called basically the king of counterfeit sneakers, or I guess I shouldn't say. So here's another thing. There's counterfeit sneakers, and then there are replica sneakers, and David, I guess, walks that line. The story talks about him being the king of counterfeits, and it started with Yeezys and creating Yeezys, and basically making 11 versions of the Yeezys to make sure that he got it right, so that people couldn't tell the difference, which is just amazing to me. I always knew that the replica or counterfeit market for sneakers was huge, but it looks like it's even bigger than I ever expected it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing about this whole story is that obviously, refining something that many times is basically like you're making the actual product anyway, right? It might even be more detailed than the actual product for a lot of manufacturers. But the fact that he's kind of spinning this whole, selling of fakes into creating his own sneakers now, and it's just fascinating. And I think that, it's not a surprise to me that this kind of stuff happens, because at the end of the day, you might be against counterfeit shoes, fake shoes, whatever you want to call them, but someone like this obviously is passionate about shoes, and for them to get to a point of creating their own thing in a legitimate way doesn't seem that far-fetched, right? I think you could look back at like sneaker blogs back in the mid 2000s, and a lot of what we know as blogs today, not a lot, but a handful of what we know as blogs today, and even some that are gone, were sites that just sold counterfeit shoes and like SpongeBob Jordans and stuff like that. And depending on where you fall on like that kind of integrity scale or morality scale, the people behind it eventually for a lot of those places turned it into great opportunity and provided opportunity for other people to get involved in the sneaker business. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like I don't really know how I feel about it. I obviously don't want to see people making fakes of any shoe. It just is frustrating on every level. It's why we have all these sites that authenticate shoes now. It just seems very weird, right? Like, but at the same time, looking at the shoe that they're kind of looking to make or making now, it's pretty wild. It's a little out there, and I think that kind of stuff is probably a good thing for the business as a whole.
I think it's it reminds me of a quote I once heard by Oscar Wilde. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't remember that mediocrity part, but I think how we learn, right, is by replicating. Like, right, everything we've learned is from seeing someone else do it or try to remake something that we've seen done. So I think it's fascinating that this is how he decided to learn shoes and is launching his brand. I don't like that he sold the replicas. I don't like any part of that, but it's fascinating to me that he found it more valuable to start his own brand versus just being in the replica business, because you can make tons of money there, right? I almost guarantee he can make more money off of replicating and selling fakes than he can with his own brand.
Oh yeah, it's definitely going to be more challenging for him to sell his own shoes.
Yeah. Right? I think this is a very interesting story from that respect. I mean, I learned to make shoes by replicating, right? One of my first big shoe projects was the Nike Mag, and my whole job was to remake the shoe from the 80s. And it's super fascinating, right? So I remade the prototypes that were movie props, right? And I had to learn how they made it. I had to figure out what was important about it to replicate that and get the same look and the same materials and everything like that. Like it definitely teaches you a ton. And same thing, I remember going through shoe school and teaching other people how to make shoes. Like, you teach them an easy shoe to make and they would remake it, and then they would add their own flavor of color or material or something. But the whole idea of replicating is actually how humans more or less learn. at least on this planet. I don't know about in space. We can talk about that. That might be different. But.
Yeah. All right. Let's do. I'm happy to go there if you need someone to test out the theories. But the interesting thing about the story is you read into the story. You read about the mayor in one of the cities where they make a lot of footwear for Western culture, arguing that. And he looks like he argued in a congressional session that the era of creating our own brand has arrived, basically saying that just having shoes just being made in China is no longer enough, and that those people that are making the shoes for Western culture should start making their own shoes now, which is I mean, you have to kind of applaud him for that, and starting really creating your own lane instead of being there and creating something for someone else, for having the country to kind of carve their own lane and make sneakers their own sneakers, really, which I think is pretty awesome. And to see David taking that route, I have to agree with you guys. It's pretty awesome. It sucks that he sold replicas and made his fortunes off of replicas, but it is a way that you learn. As a video guy, I watch movies and try to reproduce what I see in the movies, from how they cut the movie to how the sound sounds to how the music plays, how the music conveys emotion. All of those things are things that I learn from and try to incorporate into my videos to make my videos better. So as much as I want to be oh, this is terrible, the first videos that I put on YouTube were very cheap versions of E-News trying to recreate an Entertainment Tonight sort of thing for sneakers. So, I mean, who am I really to judge David, I guess? I
mean, and I think that's how everything is. To Tiffany's point, it's a human thing to learn, from others that have already done this type of stuff. And the best things come from the people that are kind of pushing that to the next level, right? And the mags is a great example, right? Recreating the originals is okay, that's cool, but why not have the power lacing system? The technology is there to where we could make this as humans, right, to get it there. Where in 85 or whatever it was, I doubt that we were even near that, from a right. Technology standpoint. But I do think that
unless you wanted to carry a car battery, no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's one of those things where there's a lot of stuff out right now that is a lot like this too. I agree a lot. A lot of what you were saying about the kind of need to create their own brands. I think that's only going to be good for everyone, right? And even looking at production or manufacturing stuff. Kanye talking about bringing YEEZY production to Chicago in the future. All of that stuff to me is good, because one thing that I think I'm generalizing a lot here, but one thing I think hurts sneakers more than anything is the lack of people that get to be involved in the nitty gritty of production or whatever piece of a business that you want to look at, right? You could say the same thing about the marketing side, where if there's only 6 people on your marketing team and there's 20 people in the company that have no idea or no way to understand what you're actually doing with things, I think that this opens up to do much more for opens up for learning, for people to learn a lot more about what's going on by just being involved in all the different aspects of the business.
Agreed 100%. I love it on one side, but I hate it on the other. So I guess I'll leave this one up to the audience. What do you guys think? You guys let us know. What do you think? Is David doing something good for the culture, that he's creating his own sneaker brand even though he started out doing replicas? Or are y'all mad that he sold replicas and sold Yeezys and made 11 different versions? I think the biggest thing with me when it comes to the counterfeit sneakers is it's one thing to make a counterfeit or a replica sneaker, but it's another thing to try and sell it as authentic. I think if it's a replica or if it's counterfeit, selling it as a replica or well, I guess you wouldn't sell it as a counterfeit, but selling it as a replica of a Yeezy and being upfront and honest about that, I think that's one thing. And I would almost say I'm cool with that and allow people to make their own decisions. But when you sell it to try and fool people and make them think that it is the real thing, I think that's when it becomes a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Am I kind of off base there?
No, I totally agree with you, because like the craft of making a shoe is no joke. And some people, try to replicate a shoe, not to sell it, but to show how they can replicate such a difficult craft. And that I think that's totally fine. Like if they can find similar materials and just make it of really high quality, and they post it on Instagram, a shoe that they remade, but they're not selling, like have at it. I mean, that shows incredible skill. I'm trying to think of another like industry to compare it to, or another kind of craft, but in the world today, a lot of people like to make things, and like making shoes is an effort. It takes a bunch of learning and a bunch of trial and error. So I think having those skills, especially if you want to be a footwear designer or be in the industry and you can replicate a shoe, that's a great skill set to have. Obviously, don't sell them, because you're taking money away from the original designer, and you wouldn't appreciate that. Or you're taking money away from the original brand that put the effort and money into it. And even if they are, huge brands like Nike or Adidas or Puma, they've earned that. They've put the effort in to have their people make that product. So
yeah. It reminds me of museums. I think I talked to you guys about this before, but in museums, most of the bones you see at museums aren't actual bones. They're what they call replicas. They don't like to call them fake or counterfeit. They're actually replica bones, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is just because how heavy bones are. So it would be almost impossible for them to suspend them the way that they do, just because of the weight of some of the bones. And also, these are like one of a kind sort of bones that they're not going to, if they put up the real bones in any one museum, no other museum would be able to get like the Tyrannosaurus or the Triceratops. So they make these replicas that look just like them, in order for other museums to be able to have that sort of stuff on display. Now, that's not that everything you see in the museum is a replica, but a lot of it is, and they actually tell you that at the museum, but most people just don't pay attention to the signs. If you look at the signs at a museum, they actually admit that they're replica bones and that they're not the authentic bones that they've pulled from the earth, which just blew my mind when I found that out.
Yeah, like I feel like I'm just learning this now. Like, really?
I mean, I think...
Dang.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's like the moon's not real.
Oh, wait, maybe it's not.
That's funny. All right, now you guys are going too far. All right,
Jacques got to go up there and see if it is.
Yeah, all right, you guys are taking this too far. All right, moving on, guys. When you start questioning space, things got to go on. To end the show on a high note, there was a woman awarded the Nobel Prize in physics. She was a part of a trio, and I'm going to say this had to do with space, although it probably had nothing to do with space, but they won for work on lasers. And when I think of lasers, I obviously think of battles happening in space. So that's where my mind goes. Obviously, it says became the first woman in 55 years and the third ever to win the Nobel Prize in physics, sharing it with an American scientist and another from France for their work in laser physics. Again, laser physics, that sounds like space battles to me in my mind. So I'm going to keep it there. This is, let me see, I should probably read more before I just totally make it seem like this woman is in space fighting battles. But it looks like 96. It doesn't. Well, you know what? I don't think it specifies here, so I am going to go with space battles.
No, she did. She did optical tweezers that can grab tiny particles such as viruses without damaging them.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
It's not space battles.
Well, / what's that sword in Star Wars? What's that called? Laser beam?
Yes.
No. Lightsaber.
Laser beam.
Lightsabers. I cannot watch Star Wars.
Well,
I fall asleep every time. I don't know. That's why I can't remember.
Oh man.
Well, I'll say this. She described herself as a laser jock, and if you call yourself a laser jock, you probably have something to do with space battles. And so I'm gonna leave it at that. So big shout out to Donna Strickland. I think that's awesome. Congratulations. And let me know when I can go on the spaceship. I will gladly fire off the first laser, just in case you need someone to do it for you. With that being said, I want to thank you guys listening to the Outside the Box podcast. I am Jacques. You can find us online at Outside Pods. If for some reason you want to look me up, I don't know why you would want to do that. You can find me at Kustoo, which is Kustoo. That's on Twitter, that's on Instagram, and that's on the YouTubes. But really, if you're going to look someone up, if you want to find out some more information, if you feel like you want someone to have a positive impact on your life, you should definitely look up Nick and Tiffany. So Nick, let them know where they can find
Nick Engvall, NickEngvall on all platforms. And you can also check out Sneaker History at Sneaker History on all platforms. But really, I think Tiffany is the one you should be following and learning from, because that's really why we're both here, even though Jacques now wants to go to space for some reason. I don't know.
I want to see an unboxing in space. Like, how are you going to do that? Plan that. Why don't you video that?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
Trust me, I'm trying to.
I'm Tiffany Beers. You can find me on Instagram and YouTube at TIFFANYBEERS.
Outside the Box Cast. You can find us at Outside Pods on Twitter and Instagram if you want to connect with us, if you want to talk to us, if you want to give us feedback, or if there's something that you want us to talk about. We're here. And again, no one has put in for relationship advice, which is really, really disappointing, because I'm telling you guys, we do it all here. And with that being said, we'll get out of here. We'll talk to you guys next week. And Donna, I know you won that Nobel Prize, but again, holler at your boy when it comes to those space lasers. All right, you guys, take it easy. Peace.